Hi all, welcome to second part for this week, and I'm going to try and keep this lecture short. Another point is, and today's Birth of a Nation as a primary text is a window into its time, and that's what I mean about primary text. And we can look at film both ways, and you can do that in your essay as well. You can look at a film from the past and say this is how it reflects its time, and in this case, we'll look at how it reflects its time and also how it influences its time, which is fascinating. So that's using film as primary text. And of course, our main emphasis in the course is using film as a secondary text. Does it reflect the past? Is it equivalent or good scholarship on the past, essentially, right? Okay, so that's where we're going, and I just so you know, I'm going to turn off the camera because that seems to be a solution to the high-pitched noise that you can hear, unfortunately, in all the videos to this point. And I found it worked. And another solution might be to use my laptop instead. So I'll look at that as well. But I cut the camera, and hopefully that high pitch, which bothers some students. I had one email so far about that. Keenly aware that Daniel's teasing me about technological problems, so I have to get on top of this. Any case, so hopefully that solves the problem. Okay, so let's get into it. And again, here's the information you're going to want to know by the time the midterm rolls around. And I hope you enjoyed this lecture. I enjoyed putting it together. Just to clarify or to restate, the film is based on Thomas Dixon's The Klansmen, which I found in Goodreads, ironically, hint it's not. And it's based on President Wilson's book as well, about the Civil War. Wilson, as a historian. Wilson let Griffith screen it in the White House, so it becomes the first movie shown in the White House, which Wilson then actually regrets. Trump's first screening, by the way, they always chart who likes what. For Clinton, it was High Noon. For Trump, it was Finding Dory. That's appropriate. Griffith's basic message in the film, you know now that America took a wrong turn after the Civil War when Congress gave freed slaves the vote, civil rights. How ridiculous. And even sent the army down south to enforce that. So the Klan were not terrorists. They're heroes because they restore white supremacy. Okay, and in that part, actually, Griffith is accurate. The Klan chases blacks from the voting booth and does restore white supremacy, the Solid South, the last of the civil rights and voting acts of the mid-1960s. The film is controversial, yes, but notably, it is a massive success. It takes in $10 million. It makes Griffith a rich man, and it helps, as I said before, that nobody has seen a full-length documentary before. But in any case, as you may know, so inspiring, it leads to the return of the KKK, and which reformulates itself, so you get the second iteration of the Klan based on the power of this film, which is fairly amazing, right? It speaks to the power of film, and it reforms right here on Stone Mountain, Georgia. Okay, Stone Mountain, Georgia, which is this amazing monolith that later on the lovely ladies of the Daughters of the Confederation, who are the custodians, conservative custodians of all things history of the Confederacy. There's the Daughters of the American Revolution as well. There's the Daughters of the Republic of Texas. They're always these well-meaning women. The DRT used to run the Alamo up until very recently. They managed that holiest of shrines in American history. Okay, so the Daughters of the Confederacy, they sell a whole lot of apple pie so that they can commemorate this spot, the KKK formulating here, and they hired this sculptor by the name of Borglum, a Danish sculptor, and to go and carve the likeness of the heroes of the Confederacy: Jefferson Davis, the president of the breakaway states, Robert E. Lee, the great general, and Stonewall Jackson. And it was a pretty amazing thing. It wasn't going to be. They wanted something 20 by 20, and he said, ladies, that's going to be like a postage stamp on a barn. You're not going to see it. So they had to, he says, go out and sell some more pies. So they do, and he makes this pretty incredible bas relief, which is still there to this day. And the Klan was having their rallies on top of that hill up until the 1980s. In any case, Borglum actually doesn't, there's some kind of controversy over pay. This is super not important. And he goes off, doesn't finish, and he goes off to do Mount Rushmore. So which less controversial. Yeah, I think. Any case, the Klan is back, and easily the most powerful symbol of the time, and specifically of the hard right turn that America takes at this point during and after World War I. Now, the Klan this time is begun by a guy named W.J. Simmons, and he's down in Georgia. He watches this movie, Birth of a Nation. His mind is blown. He comes out, and you can just see him standing on the sidewalk thinking, I got to join this organization. I got to defend America. And finding out that there is none. It's been disbanded. So he starts his first chapter. But it's really it's 1919 that's the big takeoff. The pivotal year is 1919. That's their big breakout year. By the end of 1919, they have about 100,000 members, but they're only getting started. They're on their way to peak somewhere between 3 million at baseline. The conservative estimate is 3 million. The high number is 6 million. So somewhere between 3 and 6 million Americans are in the Klan by 1925, which makes it by far the biggest non-compulsory voluntary organization, however you define it, of its day. Rotary Club has 20,000 Americans in 1925, 20,000 members. The Klan has between 3 and 6 million. So massive. Now, really importantly, and maybe you've heard this before, but this is not your daddy's Klan. This is not grandpappy's, or it's not based in the South. This is, well, it's there too, but it's mostly the North and the Midwest. It's also not just men, it's also women. This is middle America. It's also nowhere near as violent as the first Klan, and it fights a lot of different causes. Prohibition being one of them, anti-immigrant, nativism, xenophobia, all this stuff is in there. They're definitely anti-Catholic, and massively popular. They swing elections in many states, and even at the federal level. So many reps in Congress are Klansmen. So why now? What's the context that makes Birth of a Nation so resonate with this generation? And that's where we're going next. So what is the context behind all this? Well, a few things are at play here. One of them I already mentioned in our last lecture, and that is the Black as Beast ideology. The Black as Beast ideology. There's quite a bit of scholarship about this, and this is how in America the miscegenation becomes a successive fear because of the large number of African Americans, and specifically does after Charles Darwin writes his book, The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. But look at his subtitle, because Darwin often gets a free pass for not inventing social Darwinism, but really he is a social Darwinist at heart. He's already giving strong warnings about that there are favored races, and if you breed with the inferior ones, you go backwards down this evolutionary ladder. He's very clear on that point. And of course, the best of all is the British, and the best on top of that is the British male, and he just happens to be a British male coincidentally, and he's clear on that. The Irish are lower than the British, women lower than men, and then other races in this pecking order going on down. Others will take that further. Herbert Spencer developing eugenics and whatnot. Phrenology, which is a pseudoscience based on the idea that if you measure the cranium, you can verify the intelligence of the human. And not surprisingly, the shape of the head of most Northern Europeans is the ideal one for reflective ability and for delayed gratification, all the things that the poor Africans lack because of their shaped cranium, right? So completely ridiculous stuff. But in America, what we get is a real fascination with this and an outpouring of pseudoscientific, air quotes, scholarship about what the American Negro is and what he represents. And not surprisingly, what he represents is a threat to American civilization. And so, turn of the century, you get this outpouring of literature in this direction. A good example of that is Charles Carroll's best-selling book, The Negro a Beast, or In the Image of God. His answer is pretty clear. They are a beast. Okay, but specifically, what Carroll gives us is that they are a beast who was foreordained to serve as to live, to exist in perpetual service to white people. So this is the reason that black people exist. Others are saying that they are, and Carroll himself, as well as others, that they are actually on a separate evolutionary ladder. They're not even part of the human race. Okay, so that's that Black as Beast ideology. Now, of course, there's no consensus about this black as beast ideology, as with the years leading up to the emancipation to the Civil War. There's a strong element in America that argues very much for the progressive element, that argues for the equivalency of all, and they do that based on their reading of scriptures and social justice and liberty for all. But the black as beast ideology is very strong, and if you're not subscribing to that, at the very least, the popular culture is reducing African Americans, infantilizing them for sure. So whether or not you're a hardcore believer in these ethnographic theories or go that direction, and some like William Jennings Bryan see it as a huge threat. Right. In fact, that if you know anything about Inherit the Wind and the Scopes Monkey trial in the 1920s, he sees evolution as a threat, not so much just for religion, which religious people did see it, but as a threat for what it does to reducing African Americans, to removing protections from them, because it serves as justification for that kind of a thing. So there's deeper themes playing out here. It's complex. In any case, what we also see in this era, this infantilization of African Americans, and we see it through the minstrel shows of the time, which are super popular. This begins in the mid-19th century and probably climaxes around the end of the century into the early 20th. And what we get there is blackface. We get white artists who have these stock characters of Zip Coon and Jim Crow. Zip Coon being the hayseed. Oh, sorry, he's the fancy. Kind of what you would call the uppity black, right? This stock genre of the uppity black, and Jim Crow is that not so bright hayseed, happy clappy slave, the kind that you see in Birth of a Nation. So these are the two stock characters that Americans tend to believe that African Americans fit into, and we also see you get a sense of this in these kind of characterizations and stereotypes in Tin Pan Alley sheet music, which is the sheet music industry back then. This is how people got their music. They would order sheet music and they would play it at home. What's most popular in the sheet music industry of Tin Pan Alley are what are called coon tunes or coon songs, and they're brutal, right? There's one, coon coon coon. There's another one, all coons look alike to me. These are best-selling songs for Americans at the turn of the century, and it's interesting, too, that some scholars, debasing as these are, some scholars point a line between this and white interest in black music, which legitimate black music, which is supportive of the emergence of the blues. And certainly by the 1920s, too, we have some whites who are entranced with what's happening in places like Harlem and Chicago, and we get the Harlem Renaissance, where the Cotton Club and all the rest, where African American blues and jazz is there are those among white Americans who find it fascinating and accept it on its own merits, and to treat it seriously as something to be respected. In any case, definitely this is not what this is about. If you want to have a sense of what it is like from the African American perspective in this dark time, this nadir of race relations in American history, you only have to look at Booker T. Washington. He is the leading voice for the African American freedom movement, for the African American community in general, from at least 1890 up until his death in 1915, which to that point is a fairly unified voice. And he comes from a Southern perspective, having been born in slavery, and then being a beneficiary of the Reconstruction era, the radical Reconstructionists. He went to Hampton, which was one of these historically black universities that was established under Reconstruction. Howard is another one of them. Howard was named after the head of the Freedmen's Bureau. And this is where a lot of leading lights in the black community have come from, including the new Vice President, Kamala Harris. In any case, growing up in the South, he's keenly aware of the position of his race, and specifically of those that are even worse off than him. He's from Virginia, but the plantation districts, who the Deep South, Louisiana, Alabama, Arkansas, these areas, and he sees that there's something, that the poverty there, and just the degradation of the blacks, the freedmen in those areas, is what convinces white America that they are beasts. So his whole idea is to uplift the race, racial uplift, through the dignity of work, and through basic skills, teaching basic skills of thrift and industry, and these kind of habits, in making and economic utility, uh, getting a future for the black race, by teaching them in agricultural colleges and institutions, of learning where they can apply a trade and prove useful to in the reconstruction of this region of America. And that's his whole message. And the point about him is the best he can do, the only thing he can really do, is to assure white America that the black race has no designs on complete racial equality. We're not after political equality. We're not after the vote. Those things might come in the future. Secretly, he's pushing for those, but publicly he has to say that this is not our goal. Our goal is to help you reconstruct the South. And his message to white America is made very clear in this beautiful speech, this really important speech that's live recorded, and you can still find it. And it's called the Atlanta Compromise speech that he gives in 1890s in Atlanta, Georgia, to the white business class there, the white business community of all the South, who come out to this major annual Cotton States Exposition. And what he says there is, and there's a great quote from it, this very famous quote from American history, with this wonderful metaphor that in all things that are purely social, we can be as separate as the fingers. So he says segregation is okay, yet one as the hand in all things essential to mutual progress. So don't worry, don't spend your energies keeping us repressed, because to the extent that you focus on keeping the white, being fearful of our race, and keeping us repressed, keeping us down in the ditch, you are also down in that ditch with us, because you have to hold us down. So let's get out of the ditch together, and let's rebuild the South. Very inspiring message, and a very timely one, for a time when most Americans really believe the blacks are not equal to them. So, and it's a message that's controversial today, because shortly, I mean, even within his own lifetime, W.B. Du Bois says, no, we need persistent manly agitation, fighting for civic rights. But Booker T sees that to build bridges with white America that is this racist, you have to give them this message. And he is wildly successful in leveraging a whole lot of millions of dollars out of especially northern white philanthropists to fund colleges like the one he sets up in Alabama, the Tuskegee Institute, very famous institute where the students built the buildings and where they're taught trades, right, which he thinks is more useful than anything else. Higher education is not something that's going to get our race anywhere at this point. But so Booker T is great for showing us the agency of African Americans at this point, and just what a quandary that they're in the post-Reconstruction era, where this is the best that they can hope for, this kind of offer. And another reason I'm giving you Booker T is because this will blow your socks off. At one point, he is invited by Teddy Roosevelt. He has a meeting with Teddy Roosevelt. In fact, Booker T is more famous than most American presidents in his lifetime. He has a higher name recognition among Americans than presidents. But because presidents come and go, and Booker T is the leader for a very, very long time. In any case, he's having lunch with Teddy Roosevelt, he's having meetings with Teddy Roosevelt, and he invites him to stay afterwards for lunch. Okay, and the African American community thinks this is awesome, and they print this artwork of that lunch with the words equality in it. You can find that all over the place shortly afterwards. In the African American black press, about the white. The South goes wild with rage, at least definitely certain elements in the South. And I'll give you examples of that. Here's the editor of the Memphis Scimitar, who says this: it was the most damnable outrage ever perpetrated on any citizen of the United States. And And then he uses the N-word liberally. I got rid of that, but read that amazingly offensive, incredible answer or response to this. Okay, but it gets even worse. It gets even worse than this one, because this is just the editor of the Memphis Scimitar. Here's the governor of Mississippi. Here's the governor of Mississippi's response to this lunch. And there's the governor of Mississippi sitting with his wife and his daughters. And yeah, you want Quentin Tarantino to show up at this point, if you know what I'm talking about. Governor James Vardaman. And then we have the incredibly handsome South Carolina Senator Ben Pitchfork Tillman. And here's his response, which is unbelievable, right? But I don't give you these just to be prurient. I don't give you these for the shock offense. I give you them to show you what passes muster in Dixie in terms of reaction to something as minor to us as Booker T, one of the most famous Americans of the time, the most, lunching with the president. Okay, so the Black as Beast ideology really explains a lot about the context of the time and why this film resonates and what it builds on and what it encourages. Black as Beast ideology and this time, this era of the nadir of race relations between white and black. Another is the Great Migration. Okay, Great Migration. Now, various dates given for this. Suffice to say, it begins in earnest in 1890 that African Americans, freedmen, are trying to leave the South. Okay, which is think of it, their position there is more tenuous now than it was under slavery. And what I mean by that is when they were slaves, the average slave, as I said, was worth about $1,000. So there's a built-in disincentive to do harm to a slave. That is completely gone in the Reconstruction period. So there's nothing to be lost in doing violence against African Americans. And the solution for them is to try and get out of the South. And of course, that makes them prima facie criminals because they're getting out of labor contracts and the black codes that have come back. And going west is really difficult because there's armed gangs that patrol the Mississippi River and will send them back. They'll even cut off hands of African Americans and send them back home, as in you want to go west, try doing it without your hands. So terrible things like that. And as I said, there's lynching, there's rape. So it's a dark time. And that said, a lot of African Americans, this is they see this as their home, especially those that are born in slavery and are more reluctant to leave. It's a second generation. It's their children that are eager to get out. And it begins in earnest about 1890, and suffice to say, 500,000 African Americans leave the South between 1910 and 1920. This is when it really takes off, and a lot of that is now they're heading north for war-related work as of 1914. 1917 is when America enters World War I, but before that already America is industrializing is selling war-related goods. So black population of Chicago doubles in this time. Many places, especially in the Midwest, it's even more so. Cleveland, it more than quadruples. Now, what happens though, and this is this paradox, is that that blacks find out that this is not crossing the Jordan into the Promised Land. Many had come to Washington D.C. very early on before this, and so it already had a significant black community, but other cities had not, and to find that equality, right, to get out of the Jim Crow South. But with that later influx, what happens is that equality and opportunity that draws the blacks north disappears because of their arrival. So where whites were okay to have integrated schooling and whatnot, when blacks are a tiny minority and almost non-existent in northern cities, that disappears. So you see, for example, segregated schooling coming in New York for the first time in memory. You see de facto housing segregation in places like Harlem and in South Chicago. Another really key point is that blacks are not allowed in white labor unions, so segregation in unions and organized labor. Because of that, they'll be used by industry and industry and business, by the capitalists to weaken the white unions. They'll be used as strike breakers. Okay, so they become the scabs, and you can imagine what that does to racial to racial tensions in northern cities. It massively adds to them, especially during the war, when we have a lot of whites coming from the south going north for war-related work. And what happens is they find themselves competing for work with the grandchildren of granddaddy's slaves. So this does not go over well, and adds massively to the tension. Okay, so there's that. The Great Migration, Jim Crow segregation follows. The other thing, third point, so we got Black as Beast ideology, Great Migration, and what follows from that. Another point is this. With World War I, we also have a hard turn to the right, and we have this growing nativism and xenophobia, and which becomes a war on enemies and war on those of other colors, and that is an attitude that's being encouraged from the top, from the president himself, President Wilson. Okay, now this last point, our third point here, is not new, and that needs to be said. That this is a very old theme in American history. So if you're thinking the "Build the Wall" chant was a novelty, 100% you're wrong. And this is a very, very old theme, and it goes back to when America did become the land of the poor and huddled masses, of which they're always kind of ambiguous about, not the sense that it's not a good thing, and this doubt that American Republic really is a place where that it has the power to overcome these differences, that liberty and our Republican institutions is enough, that the absorptive capacity of America is limited. Okay, and that fear and doubt really picks up in the late Gilded Age in the 1890s, as we get millions of Catholic and Jewish and other immigrants, Eastern Europeans especially, coming into the United States. Also, after 1898, America becomes an empire when it defeats the Spanish and Spanish-American War. Now, Filipinos are coming to the States in really good numbers. There's about 8 million new people now of darker skin, Puerto Ricans, Cubans, who are also showing up in the United States, and this is part of the fear of the time, and this is also why people like Mark Twain were against empire in the first place. It comes in large measure out of racial motives. Okay, so not a new thing, okay, about building the wall, but it's definitely ramping up in World War I. Now, what happens during World War I is beginnings of what we call the Red Scare. And what matters to know here is that America gets dragged into war against a dubious enemy, and it comes out with a real one, the Soviet Russia, which, by the way, is committed to the destruction of global capitalism, is 100% clear on that. Now, it doesn't help that immigrants and blacks seem to be joining the Communist Party, which they are. It doesn't help that these new immigrant Italians, a lot of them are anarchists, or disproportionately, right? Italian anarchists are throwing bombs all over the place at the end of the war. Rockefeller's house, the Attorney General's house. It doesn't help that the president himself, during the war, basically declares war on what he calls hyphenated Americans. And you can see there in that quote, there's no such thing as a hyphenated American who's a good American. An American who's good is the man who's American and nothing else. Ethnic Americans, those who are Greek Americans, Italian Americans, whatever, you have to be American first and foremost, and the enemy is the outsider. And Wilson is utterly clear on that point, and in fact he passes what's called the Anti-Sedition Act, which makes basically free speech becomes illegal during the war if it's anything against the government or the draft. And who he's targeting, though, are these anarchists and communists who are very, very vocal about their opposition to the war, and they're often foreigners, right, foreign-born, and are not American citizens. And they get rounded up after the war. A lot of them get charged and deported. These are the famous Palmer raids of post-war period that happened under the Anti-Sedition Act and the Espionage Act. J. Edgar Hoover plays a big role here, and the famous Emma Goldman, even though she's American, gets deported on what's called the Soviet Ark with about 500 other dissidents or free speech advocates who end up getting sent to the Soviet Union. Okay, so we also have the rise of the Wobblies, this this union that is full of Eastern Europeans, and so basically anyone who is other than your white Protestant American is tarnished with being, by association, with being part of the chaos, disorder, the Bolshevism of the time, right? And there's a real element to this. This is the time of the Wall Street bombing. This happens in 1920. 36 people are killed, right? And anarchists are doing some crazy shit in America. There's this one incident where a Gallianist, an anarchist, a chef in the city of Chicago at a dinner for the Archbishop. So the mayor's there, the Archbishop, and all the leading lights of Chicago are there. So this has a setting of like some Marvel comics. It's like Gotham City, right? And this anarchist is in the kitchen and he puts arsenic in the soup. Everybody eats the soup as the first course. They all have, and thank God somebody gets sick and it's discovered what happened. And everybody ends up in the hospital having their stomachs pumped. So this is what's happening during the war and right after the war. And partly it's fed by the fact that 1919, we have a global depression. Okay, so these veterans come home from World War I, and they come, and World War I is our first real exercise in total war, or to a large extent, and so the demobilization had not been planned for. And what happens? Veterans come home, and there is no plan for shifting the economy to a consumer economy. Mass unemployment. Okay, Spanish flu that year as well, which is another stressor. Then you add in some torrid heat waves, and never underestimate the power of the humidex to make people go insane, batshit crazy. And all this rhetoric which Wilson had, right, comes to bear in what's called Red Summer 1919. Okay? And we have this brutal summer that year. And just to be clear, his policies are out and out racist, and Wilson is an out and out racist. He purges the federal administration of blacks. As I said, he deports enemy aliens, and he incites all this mistrust of anyone who is other. But yeah, 1919, with the recession, we have race riots all over America from one end to the other. It's just a brutal year. No less than 36 American cities experience a race riot. And give or take 1,000 are dead by the time it ends, mostly African Americans, of course. Chicago, good example. And here, this was a famous one, some black boys. It's a hot day, they drift over. Chicago's on the lake, right? They're at the beach, and they drift over into the white beach area. So the mob throws rocks at them. One of them drowns. The police do nothing. A week later, 38 people are dead. So blacks riot, whites riot, 2-to-1 ratio in terms of death, black to white. Elaine, Arkansas. Elaine, Arkansas is another one. 200 are killed, 5 of them white. What happens in Elaine, Arkansas? The riot there starts because black sharecroppers are organizing a union. The whites don't like that. That freaks them out. There's a meeting of blacks. Any meeting of blacks freaks them out. So the popos show up. There's a shootout. And the whole county goes wild, putting down this supposed black insurrection, which the police had started. In the end, 200 blacks are dead, 5 whites, and of the 70 people charged, all of them are black. So that's a great example. That's enough said on Red Summer 1919. It's just brutal. Well, not enough said. The FBI blames these riots on the black communists. J. Edgar Hoover says exactly that. And the Wall Street Journal writes this. It says, race riots seem to have for their genesis, a Bolshevist, a Negro, and a gun. So that complete association between communism, being black, and violence, and that's all. It's them that are to blame for all these problems. Okay, so World War I ends. Griffith's film by now is a couple years old, and KKK has got itself good and established. And the riots taper after 1919. The economy actually improves, and people go home. But the people have spoken, and we get in 1920, the White House goes to this unimaginative bonehead is the best way to describe him. His name is Warren Harding, and this is the first time that women are voting in America, and the theory is that he wins because he's so handsome. But in any case, you be the judge on that one. But we get what's called his slogan, actually. Maybe you know it, but it's called, his slogan is a return to normalcy. Okay, emphasis on return. It's a grammatically awkward version of MAGA, Make America Great Again. And the return he means is to pre-war America. The return he means is to pre-war America. And to that end, he starts with cutting off immigration. So under him, we get very racist immigration reform, the worst that America's seen yet, severe quotas on undesirables, Asians are kept out altogether, and we also get a return to isolationism and conservative values. Okay, so we get, and that is symbolized best by prohibition, also by the anti-intellectualism of the time, also by, as I said, the racist immigration policies, building the wall, quotas, etc., etc. Okay. We also see it in the fact that he does nothing at all, Warren Harding, to take leadership in the fact, and in fact supportive of the racial integrity or racial purity legislation that begins all over America. Now, American states have long had anti-miscegenation laws, or otherwise called miscegenation laws, that bar marriage between whites and blacks for reasons I gave you already. But now states are passing racial integrity laws that beef that up, and that begins with Tennessee. Virginia passes it, and pretty soon 24 states have them, and almost every state. I think every state of the union had anti-miscegenation laws at one point, which get revoked over different time periods. But now in the 1920s, these are beefed up, and these laws are sometimes characterized as hypo-descent laws because of their one-drop rule, which is that if you have 1/36 fraction of African American heritage, you then are black, which means that a lot of people who look completely white are categorized as black, and your birth certificate has to state the date of birth. Now, the Nuremberg laws in the Weimar Germany, in Nazi Germany after the Weimar Republic ends, are very much like this. And there's some debate whether these are inspired by what happens in America at this point. In terms of categorizing people, which is a very, very difficult thing to do. You're going back to grandparents here on one side of one grandparent, great-grandparents, to get the 1/36 fraction. Okay, so Warren Harding is the culmination of all of this come together, and just altogether not a great president. Certainly not for African Americans, which may remind you of another president in our own times. Okay, and in fact, there's a lot of parallels that can be drawn between what happened then and today, and I'm going to try and do that for you here. Obviously, we found out in 2016 populism is back in a big way. Xenophobia was back and was acceptable. MAGA ball caps, build the wall, drain the swamp, unite the right. Very fine people on both sides, right? In the riot 2 weeks ago now, we love you, right? The alt-right, okay, and it's brutal. Right, but it's definitely an echo of what happened 100 years ago. As in 1919, populism today largely comes from a place of fear and insecurity, which then is manifest as anger, racism, and xenophobia. And it's coming largely from, and here's where I'd like to connect this, it's coming largely from that same white working and lower middle class sector who, just as in the era of W.D. Griffith, were feeling left behind by forces beyond their control. Okay, so just like in 1915 to 1920s, this is the same group. That segment is a key part of the Trump base, just as it was of Wilson and Harding, right? And the thing is, they have been left behind. They have been left behind, and you can map that. You can map that. Okay, so let's take a look at that. This shows you the change in intensity of Democratic-Republican voting in 2016, and it shows you where Trump was strongest. Okay, and you see there in Appalachia and heading down into the Midwest, right, where he has just huge flippant support to him. The other map shows you kind of maps despair in the United States, and it shows you overdose deaths from 2000 to 2014. And this is that left behind white working class who votes so heavily for Trump. Okay, this the Rust Belt unemployed working class, and by working class, the definition of that is those who do not go to cannot afford or are not expected to or don't typically don't get higher education, okay, with a high school diploma or less. And this is where this is the Trump base, much as it was what motivated those racist policies of the past. And in fact, you can it's empirical that these people have been left behind. Okay, since 2014, the life expectancy for white American men is falling. 3 straight years up to 2017, the last year in which there are stats. The life expectancy for white American men has been falling. Now, that is not a normal thing in a developed country. Okay? It's not normal. Here's a great quote by Francis Fukuyama, who talks a lot about identity politics. And this is his quote on the Fox News Trump Tea Party MAGA crowd, and I think it's really helpful. That one of the great drivers of the nationalism that sent Trump to the White House has been the perceptions of invisibility, the resentful citizens fearing the loss of their middle-class status, so that fear of their status, just as in the days of Griffith, point an accusatory finger toward the elites, who they believe do not see them, and also downward toward the poor, who they feel are unfairly favored. The insecurity of the angry white working class, okay? And that's a real consistent theme in American history. Now, the irony, of course, is that Warren Harding was no more a solution to these people than was Donald Trump. In fact, in many ways, they're the opposite. They're not the solution to these people. They're the opposite of what they need. Now, here's a hopeful message. I'm going to end on a message of hope. Okay, and that hopeful message is quite simple. It's simply this, that the populism always extinguishes itself. Okay, populism always extinguishes itself. In fact, what did Biden just say in the first inaugural? He quoted scripture. Weeping may endure for a night, joy cometh in the morning. And so let's go there. Warren Harding, Exhibit A. Populism extinguishes itself, and has again. Warren Harding, Mr. Normalcy, our populist anti-immigrant president, he dies in a San Francisco hotel room halfway through the 3rd year of his first term. But the important thing is this is just as scandals about him are becoming public, and those scandals are about his sexual infidelities. In fact, there's even a theory that he was poisoned by his wife, and that hasn't been utterly disproven because he was cremated right away. Also, bribery, more importantly. So try this. Hey, Google, what was the Teapot Dome scandal? And you'll find out what did Warren Harding and what destroyed his reputation, convinced Americans to turn into head a different direction. See the movie There Will Be Blood, because this is based on that scandal, or it's based on the Sinclair Lewis book of 1927 called Oil, which is about the Teapot Dome scandal. Okay, so that's Harding. Exhibit B. The Klan goes into free fall after 1925. Now, this is largely because, well, it's a couple of reasons, but one of them is the Grand Dragon of Indiana, the Grand Dragon, get this, he rapes and murders a young white woman. Now, this couldn't be, this is a complete reverse narrative of the plot of the Klansmen, of Dixon's book, which makes the Klan the heroes, right? And of Griffith's film, where the black man is the one who's supposed to do this. Okay, so this is one shot. The second punch is the embezzlement problems, and it becomes pretty clear that the Klan, at one level, is nothing more than a fundraising organization for its leadership, and that all the money goes sideways. So embezzlement of Klan funds, registration funds, and all the bling that they sell to members and all their fundraising exercises. So it's like, hey, I sent my money in for the new kitty cape. You know, what's up? I didn't get it. So in any case, from a peak of 6 million in 1925, the Klan drops hugely to 350,000 maybe by 1929. Okay, third point. Just at that time, when the Klan is at its nadir, 1929, the stock market crashes. Okay, so a crisis of an economic crisis beyond which America has never experienced. And how does it respond to this? Well, look at how Germany responds. It goes towards fascism. But America does not. America goes to the left. America votes in Franklin Delano Roosevelt. In fact, it doesn't only vote him in once, it votes him in, Americans vote him in 4 times, okay, right up until 1945. When he dies and Truman takes over. But what FDR does, and maybe you know this, is he brings in the closest thing to Bernie Sanders socialism that you have ever seen in American history, and he calls that the New Deal. The first New Deal is a step in that direction. The second one, even more so. Okay, very much socialism. Very much managed industry and business from the top in order to save American capitalism. Okay, so the answer to the crisis, as I say, is more like socialism than fascism, and that all of which suggests, and there's Roosevelt with his alphabet agencies, the many government agencies that are set up, make work projects. And colorblind as well. African Americans are given a massive boost in the second New Deal and the federal writers projects and all other kinds of things like that. Now, all this suggests, as I was saying, is that at the end of the day, there is more middle in middle America in the time of D.W. Griffith and into the 20s than we would think, from the images of the film, from the images of the Klan, the riots, the headlines, Red Summer 1919, right? And it's a well-studied fact that America today also is not as divided as the hyper-partisan media like Fox News would have us believe, right? Now that media disguises what pollsters and academics consistently find, and it's something that's been called a reasonable majority or a reasonable middle. Also, it's been called an exhausted majority. Now, those are the reasonable middle and exhausted majority are the titles of studies done in 2018, proving a broad consensus in America on many things. One of the most amazing is that 2/3 of Americans believe in stronger gun control laws. 2/3 of Americans consistently believe that we need stronger gun control laws. Okay, so the right and the left have wildly exaggerated ideas about the other. And there was a study on that also last year called The Parties in Our Head, which is a play on words, political parties in our head. And it shows that Democrats and Republicans think pretty outlandish and inaccurate things about the other that aren't supported by the polls that suggest that they aren't this way. Okay, and that comes out of the hyperpartisan media again and the identity politics that capture the headlines. Okay, but notwithstanding that, there is this solid center. Okay, that we've come back to again. And Joe Biden, as he put it, our better angels have always prevailed. Our better angels have always prevailed. So I'll leave you with that hopeful thought that just as the better angels prevailed by the later 1920s and 30s, so they have again. And in fact, actually, I'll leave you with a quotation from the one American who would not have been surprised when Trump got in 2016. And that is H.L. Mencken, who predicted what we have seen back in 1920. He said this on some great and glorious day: "The plain folks of the land will reach their heart's desire at last, and the White House will be adorned by a downright moron." Yeah, but Mencken is a cynic of the first order, who, ironically, his politics go off the rails. So yeah, don't count America down. Yeah, the joy cometh in the morning, 100%. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. That shows what you can do with a film as a primary document. And thanks for listening. Any questions, let me know.